Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner, Dr. Blackard, whatever. You can call me whatever you want. And you're a
And
person
and you can have Pop Tarts TM any
any time of
kind
the day.
of the day.
This is episode 206 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. What are we talking about today, Victoria?
Higher than our Ways&Triple-Decker Sundae. Some things never change.
Yeah. You know, it's funny with the title of the second episode because as the episode was going on, I was like, what could this title possibly have to do with what this episode is?
Yeah, same.
And I mean, even beforehand, we were like, what could this title possibly be about?
hmm
Um,
I'm not really centered. I'm gonna scooch. There we go.
I still think it's interesting, even in the end, that that's what they chose for the episode title. I mean, I feel like in a
Yeah,
way it's kind of a red herring. Like it was supposed to throw us off with like how normal it sounded.
yeah.
Um, but in other ways, I think it was
I
just
guess that kind
supposed
of
to
works in
be.
its favor, like having like a front for
Yeah,
like
but
being
I think it's
something
also
else.
maybe
But
to help us focus on like I mean, because the idea. I mean, that was like the final scene. That's until the final scene. I was like, "What a random line to pick out of this episode," and I was like,
I mean, that
"Okay,
was
so it's
mentioned
kind of."
like earlier in the
Well,
episode.
I know that's what I'm saying. I was like, "What a random line to pick out of this
Yeah.
episode," and then the final scene. I'm like, "Okay, so it's kind of supposed to be emblematic of the journey that Olivia has made over the course of this episode." Um. So, episode 924, Higher Than Our Ways. What happens in this episode?
So, first off,
I don't remember
uh,
exactly what the defining end of this one is
I
versus the beginning of the
do.
other one. Okay.
It's the end of the funeral, I
Okay.
believe, and the first time Olivia like talks to the guy.
Well, I was gonna say all I remember is that the guy doesn't show up until the second episode,
Okay,
the
never
beginning of the
mind.
second one.
She like gets the assignment and then starts working on it, and
Okay.
that's when the episode ends. And then the next episode opens with her talking to the guy. So, you guys know that thing where we usually do like one episode and then we review it, and then we do another episode and then we review it, and we usually just like, even for multi-parters. So, funny story, Devin forgot that that was a thing.
Well, because I said at the end
So,
of last episode, I was like, "Well, to record, well, I'll just listen to both of them unless it's like, unless they're related, and I'll be like, hey, what if I start listening to the second one and it's tied to the first one? I'll stop and I'll be like, hey, Victoria,
and he
don't
didn't
listen to
do
both of
that.
them." And you were
Yeah.
like, so I can listen to both of
So,
them, and I was like, no, and you're like, you got this on camera, blah 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 blah.
so
So
message, do you want to say? Do you?
basically,
Yeah,
I
you
was
say
like,
it.
"Hey, Victoria, I listened to both episodes because I
This was a
completely
couple
didn't.
weeks ago.
I didn't
He
think about
texted
it
me this.
whatsoever. I completely forgot because I was so pulled in by these episodes, and I was like, Victoria, just so you know, I listened to both episodes already. This was like a day after we recorded the last one.
hmm
Um, and
And
she
I
was
was
like,
like, oh,
"Oh, so they
sweet, I
weren't?"
haven't. So they weren't related to each other?
And I was like, it's. I completely forgot about that." And you were like, "So that's a no, then I guess." I was like, I'm not going to say either way for the sake of the integrity of the listening experience. I'm just saying I
So
completely forgot
Devin is
to
a
watch
lying,
out.
dirty cheater, is what we can glean from
But
this.
we both think that it's good to do these
But
as a
we,
pair. Yeah.
yeah, we both agreed that we are glad we listened to these two right after the other. I don't know if you saw, but the last thing in this album is a bonus track,
Yes, I do
which
know that. I would have
is,
sent it to you
I
already.
think it's alluding to
I don't remember what episode
Olivia.
it was. A mute, though.
It just says about the album title.
Ah, yeah. So it's probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it doesn't have like a description. So I'm thinking it's just generally about like Olivia
I'm sure it's about
in this
Olivia's arc,
episode.
yeah.
So do you think this is going to be their way of sending off Olivia and the Parkers?
I doubt this is what they're going out on.
I'm so nervous every single time because I don't want another like Mandy to happen where
I
it's just
know.
like
I
I didn't
understand that.
realize it was the last time I had her until it was too late.
Yeah. It is very funny how you asked that about Olivia last time, and I was like, Victoria, she's on the cover
I
of the
ask
next
it
album.
about Olivia every time because I'm constantly worried I'm going to lose her.
Every time since album 51, you've been asking this.
On the podcast, no less, which is very odd because
Yeah.
it didn't exist back during album 51.
Yeah.
And I was Olivia's age
Mm-hmm.
when album 51 came out.
It's a long time ago.
Speaking of which, so in this episode,
You were younger than Olivia.
I was in grade 7 when 51 came out, because that's when we won the contest. Because I specifically remember talking about it to some of my friends outside of Madame Levante's room. So this first episode is Olivia and Zoe and their classmates, which includes Emily, but Emily does not appear because she is the one who dies. Spoiler alert. She doesn't die. She just doesn't show up. She's not really important.
We were wrong, first off.
She was a big red herring.
She wasn't even in it.
She wasn't even in the episode. It, like, when the sirens came and stuff, and, like, the emergency team, I was just like, did frigging Emily die off screen?
Didn't even get one last line.
Did Emily die off screen? No! No, that did not. That very much did not happen.
Would have been a fascinating way to follow up the season opener.
So angry.
They're like, okay, Cooper's joining the team too, and then Emily dies suddenly.
Cooper's joining the team because it's going to go back to being a 3-man team very fast.
And poor Maury is just desperately trying to, like, keep up with the name changes to come up with a good name for this group.
So, Olivia and Zoe and their classmates are going on a ski trip, and neither of them are really good skiers. Wilson and Jason hear about this, and Wilson immediately signs himself up to be a chaperone because they're like, one of them will fall, which you and I did talk about the falling being, like, metaphorical and one of them not being a Christian anymore. And we thought it was going to be Emily, but it was actually Olivia. But we were, like, really close, though. We were really close because we thought this arc was going to be album long, Emily not being a Christian anymore for, like, the hump section in the middle.
And that's why I was...
And it's actually Olivia.
That's why I was surprised by the end of the opener, because it sounded like, you know, Emily called Whit on the phone and it sounded like she was, you know, starting on an upward trend of, like, working through that. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But I was like, it could still be someone else. And it was.
It was. So they go on the ski trip, and there's lots of just them going on really easy, like, hills, and Wilson just freaking out because he's like, they're gonna die, and they're on, like, the green triangle run or whatever.
Yeah. They were on the bunny slope even.
Like, they were on the bunny slope for like 45 minutes, and they're like, Wilson, can we please do another hill? And he was like, no!
He has them chained to his ankles like prisoners, and they're like, Wilson, I think you're actually making this much more dangerous for us to ski.
So, like, some messages. I'll just do the summary first. And then one of the teachers on the ski trip, when they're skiing very fast, hits a tree and gets very injured and passes away. And it goes to the funeral, and we get Ava back. Kingdom Hearts is ruining me. Ava back. I miss Ava. Where is she?
Good question. She has her own mission.
I missed Ava, so it was nice to get Ava back. At least one of the Ava Avas has returned from the war. The Keyblade War. And there's, like, this
Miss Adelaide has, like, a really big role that I really like in this episode.
Yeah.
But, I'll get into my stuff.
There's this bit where the teacher's son is like a little boy, so he doesn't understand the concept of death really. And Olivia goes over to talk to him, and she's just, like, trying not to cry. And she was like, hey, I never really spent that much time with your dad, but when I did have him for school, he was like a really great teacher and he was really nice. And I just wanted you to know that. And the boy's like, oh, I can go tell him he's over there sleeping. I'll wake him up. And Olivia's like, no,
They were like,
I
I don't
gotta
think
go.
the son really gets it. It's like, no, yeah, I think it's pretty clear he doesn't get it because he tried to wake up his dad's corpse at the wake. So
Yeah, Olivia stopped him from actually going over, but that was difficult to listen to. This, I was like a little bit on edge when the content warning happened, and I was just like, oh, that was a lot. That was a lot. Like, that was a lot. It was a lot more than I thought it would be. Because I think the last time we really got a content warning was, I know like the escape room had one. Was there one?
Yeah, that's probably the last one.
Before that? Was there one like between these?
I mean, did
like
Ride Out Revelations have one? I don't think
I'm
so.
trying to remember if any episodes have had one since then, it would be the Ride Out Revelations, but I don't think it did. I could be wrong. So that all happens, and then Olivia goes to talk to Miss Adelaide because she knows Miss Adelaide isn't a Christian, and she asks her about like what Miss Adelaide's thoughts are on like faith and stuff. And Miss Adelaide says that
Miss Adelaide handles this like a champ.
She like does not want to talk about it, which like separation of like church and state kind of thing. And then Olivia's like really gunning for it.
So I mean, it's not just separation of church or state. It's just like she's a public school teacher. That's not an appropriate conversation to have with your student. And
I'm going to get to that later because when I was 10, something like this happened to me. I don't remember what my teacher's name was at the time, but I think you had her too. No, you didn't. But I had a teacher when I was in grade 5.
Okay, I know who you have.
Do you remember? Yeah, I had the same teacher for 4 and 5. But do you remember like that guy who came to the church and he like prayed over all those people and he like visited I think like 2 different years, and a lot of people were like healed and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I mentioned that to my teacher because she was like my favorite teacher, and then she was just like, "Oh no, that didn't happen." And I was like, "No, it did." And she was like, "No, no," and that was like the moment where I realized like, oh, not everyone's a Christian. Not everyone believes in God. That was like the moment of my life where I had that epiphany. So I definitely felt that conversation a lot with Olivia and Miss Adelaide because I would have been 2 years younger than Olivia at that point in time. And then I remember like I also felt like kind of just like when I was 12, and that's when like you or like young adults, not young adults yet, but like I guess like young adults, kid zone kind of youth group kind of started happening, and like I think that was good for me to be in at the time. Honestly, like I'm not gonna say names because I don't want to say people's names, but
no, dox people.
Someone who we know, I don't know. You know how sometimes you just have like a person who you're like, I really, really trust you when it comes to like matters of faith, and whenever I hear you like talk about stuff, it's just like I feel like you get it. Like
yeah, that's how you feel about me.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I guess there's like 3 people in that case because like you like our pastor, and then also one of the other pastors at our church who's like one of the newer pastors. I'm just gonna
moving to the point.
So like when I was living in Vancouver with you, I was like really struggling, and then I remember like I met with her in the summer at Tim Hortons. So much product placement today. and we talked for a bit, and that was really helpful for me. And that's when I started writing my encouragement journal, which I don't really write in anymore very often as of the last half a year, I guess, because it just started feeling like a chore. But I think like for the 2 years I wrote in it, it was very helpful for me. There's just like a bunch of like tiny things in these 2 episodes that's just like hit. So Miss Adelaide tells Olivia that they're working on like a philosophy unit in about like a month or something like that. And they have a paper that's going to be due in 6 weeks. And Olivia can pick like a philosopher and start writing on them and researching them. And Devin and I both like tried to search who this guy was. As far as we can tell, he was created just
He's
for
definitely
the show.
not. I tried a bunch of different like spellings because I was like, maybe I just misheard the name at first, but then in the second episode, as they said it more times, I was like, okay, yeah, there's definitely nothing is coming up on Google for this name.
I tried like his century combined with his nationality and his first name, because I definitely heard the first name right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could just not find anything on him. So Olivia starts researching like this atheist guy, and that's pretty much where the first episode ends. Wilson pretty much realizes that the person who fell is Olivia, and it was talking about faith. And should we just talk about both episodes like at the same time?
No, because I can talk about my notes for the first one here.
Okay, I'll go. I didn't really send any notes for like the second one, so I'll just read these off real quick. Between texting and Skype. First thing is, oh no, a content warning. And then you sent me a big smiley face because you're evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I immediately joked and said, Olivia is gonna die.
It's funny because you said that, and I was like, how did she know? I was like, how does she know it's Olivia?
Well, like, Olivia was the first person who talked in the episode.
That's fair.
And so I was like, oh, okay, it's Olivia. But I still kind of thought it was Emily. Zoe saying pigeons can't be innocent, and Olivia saying no, and I was just like, Olivia's played hatful. The ski trip was paid for anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
If I was Olivia, I wouldn't trust that.
I'm still really curious if that is gonna come back in some way.
Yeah,
I have a
like
note about that earlier,
weird
but I'm like,
thing.
the only thing I could think of is that it's the teacher who paid for it, and somehow that's supposed to be encouraging. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's inherent like inspirational quality to that, but it's the only thing I could.
Why not say who did it, or why say it's anonymous? Like,
exactly.
They could have just said like, we're going on a ski trip. Like,
exactly.
Why say, like,
the
anonymous
fact that they made a
person.
thing out of it, especially it was in the album description mentioned. Even
it was
means.
Oh yeah,
remember,
it's gonna be
because you
thing.
brought it up and you were like, oh, just like last time with the band trip and stuff. The fact that they brought it up means it has to be important, but then they haven't brought it up again, and the only way I could think of it having some kind of meaning is if it was the teacher who did it, but even still, I don't see why that would necessarily be like meaningful. Like, oh, even though he knew he was gonna die, he still paid for us to go on the trip. Like that, I don't.
How would he have known he was gonna die?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know where's the. It's like, oh, that was really nice of him, but he didn't know what was gonna happen. So, like, the only thing you could pull out of that was, like, wow, he was nice. And they already knew that, so I don't understand especially the fact that it still hasn't been revealed. I can't imagine what the reveal would be that would have some kind of, like, meaning,
also, I will say the
to it at
teacher
this
was
point.
a Christian, and he was, like, a researcher, scientist.
He's a scientist, yeah.
I guess I did have one note on the second episode. I was just kind of sending Devin, like, jokes as Wilson was just, like, freaking out about, like, all their tiny jumps. Like, Olivia saying, I want to do the death jump. And then him being like, where's Zoe? And they're like, Zoe's on the Black Diamond. And Emily. I was just like, where's Emily? And I was just like, Zoe says, Emily is skiing down Acid Mountain as we speak. And then they were like, oh, there's like people rushing around outside. And I was like, I can't believe Emily died off screen. And then that was less funny in the next minute.
Yeah, in the next
and all the
literal 60 seconds.
all the minutes that also follow that minute. I did say, I think during the funeral, I sent a message that was just, I miss Wooten, because he hasn't been in an episode in a while, and I felt like, not on this level, but I kind of had, like, Connie during Plan B feeling, where we're just like, I'm sad, and I need Wooten to comfort me at a carnival with snacks.
Oh, I thought you were
and
saying
laser tag.
Wooten during life expectancy when he comes and visits Connie.
Wooten is very comforting presence.
Well, because I really, really like Wooten's line in Life Expectancy where he says that, like, when you're dealing with this is not the time for you to be, like, trying to answer these big questions about life and death. You need to know these things beforehand, because it's like trying to teach someone how to swim while they are drowning.
Yeah. Wooten is good. He's good, man. I need more Wooten episodes. Controversial take. I love him and Penny. I need a bit more episodes of him without Penny necessarily in them, because I kind of miss Wooten interacting with other characters who aren't Penny.
I agree with that.
Like, I would love just
Penny
like
too. We don't get a lot of either of them with other characters. Like,
I would love a straight up just like Eugene, Connie, and Wooten vibing episode. That would be so good. The philosopher was played by Jason Svea, right? It sounded like him.
I did not check.
I don't know if it was just me. I thought it sounded like him.
Well, you can look it up if you want while I go through mine.
I will look it up. I was surprised that Olivia was 12. Oh yeah, I also went on the wiki mid-listening to... at the very beginning of the second episode, and was very careful, because I wanted to see if it would say what the philosopher's name was.
I did the exact same thing.
All right. Yeah, let me see my Google search history.
Looking at my notes for the episode, so we're going...
Yeah, just lots of searching for this.
Because we were wondering previously where they were going skiing. The answer is Snow Mountain, which is a great name, guys. GG.
It's so creative.
Jason immediately beat me to the punch on the things that are 150 years old joke. I was pretty sure he would go there, but still, I was like, I mean, if he's going to drop that low-hanging fruit, I need to catch it.
Sepenov. Okay, that's how you spell his name. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I was like, I'm sure Jason's going to go for that joke. But I need to make sure someone says it. You can't let...
Mike Shapiro. Nothing is coming up for this man.
At least it's not Ben.
Ben who?
Shapiro.
Oh.
So they're talking, Wilson and Jason, and they're like, ski trip. And I was like, it's fascinating that even when Jason and Wilson know that the entire class is going, they still fixate on this assumption that, like, the three means Zoe, Olivia, and Emily.
Yeah.
And it was like, I guess they're assuming that the timing of when Wilson initially got the message meant that it was supposed to line up with them talking to Zoe about that project. And he was like, I mean, I guess God would have told me if I was wrong about it, is kind of the assumption he was going off of.
I was wondering if the teacher somehow had, like, a 3 motif that we
there was, like,
didn't realize about.
Three
like,
teacher supervisors or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think Jason brought that up later, right? He was like, maybe we were wrong about who the 3 were. He was like, no, I feel like I had a sense of we were right about that.
I think that was the second episode, though.
I think it's very funny that Wilson immediately is like, the most logical thing I can do here, the best course of action I can take is immediately picking up the phone and volunteer to be a chaperone on this field trip. Instead
He's
of
like, I'm gonna mama bear the heck out of these.
Instead of, like, telling the girls about it, warning them perhaps. Like, maybe if he tries to hover over them with medical supplies but never actually tells them directly about the message, then they're just going to try to avoid him and maybe cause something bad to happen, and I will be very irritated if he does that, and it's exactly what he did.
What's that quote? Like, curse your inevitable but sudden betrayal.
Literally, like, the conversation he was having with them about hot chocolate in the lodge sounded exactly like Eugene trying to get Buck to drink the lemonade. And that was to keep them, like you say, keep them from going down a green slope when Emily was literally going down Black Diamond runs.
Yeah, I was just imagining as soon as they like say they like went off to the bathroom or something like that, Wilson just full on like steals a skidoo and just like or
A skidoo,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, a
A
skidoo,
snowmobile.
and he skidoos across the
He blue
entire
skidoos up the
mountain
mountain.
to
Yeah.
find Emily.
It is great that he spent so long being like, no, don't go, don't go on a green square, right? Blue circle, green square, green square run.
Yeah.
Um,
But I just
he's
love that
like,
he was just like freaking out over
drink,
them and just
drink
like
hot
mama
chocolate.
birding.
Yeah,
And then
hot
he was just
chocolate.
like,
This is so good for you. Where's Emily, by the way?
where's Emily? And they're like, oh, she's on a black diamond. And he's like, she's what? It was amazing.
There's a bee.
There's a bee.
And then the teacher died.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was like, it went really heavy, really fast.
It was
I really
a very
like
big mood shift. Honestly, I am so glad that these two episodes were about the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I was not emotionally ready
to go into a
for
slice
the
of life
whiplash
episode.
of a slice of life
Same.
episode after this one.
I am really glad that Miss Adelaide had like such a heavy role, and I'm interested to see how she continues to play in this arc.
Miss Adelaide is a good character. I know we've said that before, but I
really like her, and I think that like when Wilson went to talk to her and was like, "What happened, Rhonda?" I was like, "I'm pretty sure that's only the second time they've ever said her first name on the show before."
I was kind of like surprised that like Wilson was invited by Miss Adelaide to like pray at the front as soon as the prof died, but then I realized like, oh, he was a Christian, so like that makes sense.
I really like both of these episodes, but at this point I was like, this is a really good episode. I really like how we're seeing Olivia feel the need to question things that she's never had to question before, meaning in life and all that, and that she decided to go to Miss Adelaide specifically because she's like, I want to get a different perspective on things and hear someone give different answers than I'm used to. I
like really, that these episodes exist.
I really like how measured the conversation was. I absolutely adore the way that Miss Adelaide approached it, how reticent she was to talk with a student, because she's like, I'm a public school teacher, and it's not appropriate for me, like, I really think that your parents should be here or someone else like this. And she kept on emphasizing that. She was like, I believe here are some other people that I think you should go to talk to about that, like your parents or Mr. Whitaker or your pastor and stuff like that. And she was trying to give every out. And Olivia is like, I'm making the clear and informed consent choice that I want to talk to you about this. I understand what you're saying. I don't want to go to them specifically because I already know the answers they're going to give, and I want to hear somebody give a different perspective. And in the end, Miss Adelaide was still like, I'm not going to directly talk to you about this because I still don't feel it's appropriate. However, since we are going to be having this project about philosophers, I will give you the suggestion that you could do this name if you want to do some research of your own into like alternate answers to the questions that you're trying to ask right now. That's such
a teacher thing to do. Like, I'm going to give you homework.
And even still, as she did that, she gave her additional caution about what she was choosing to do. She was like, and I want you to understand that this may cause you to ask questions that you're not ready to ask, and that can be scary and frightening. So I want you to, like, she gave her, like, absolutely every out and caution as she went and did everything right. And I was like, I really, really like this. Ava also handled it really well when Olivia's like, I don't really want to pray. And Ava's asked her if there's anything she wanted to talk about. Let her know that it's okay to feel the feelings that she's feeling right now and that there's nothing wrong with that, and that to come to her with anything that she needs to say. Then she prayed for her and said, I'm not going to make you pray if you don't feel like it. I would like to pray for you. Is that okay? And then come and let me know when you feel ready again. It was like the adults in this episode, apart from Wilson,
Wilson was a train wreck.
Doing like every correct thing at every point, and I really, really like that. It was a great episode, and I'm glad it wasn't
Phil wrote these, right?
Sorry?
Phil wrote?
Or
did Paul? Marshall. Okay. One of the big men.
Paul hasn't worked for the show in years and years. I mean, he did come back for like one episode.
Can't remember these things.
I'm really glad it wasn't a one episode resolution. I mean,
same. It wouldn't have felt
it. Yeah,
right.
there's no way it could have done it, and yet
I'm glad it's like, I was wondering if there's going to be 2
they'll
episodes, but it was like, no, we're going like all in. This
on
is an
occasion,
album
they
arc.
will try and wrap something up like that in a single episode, and it's like, no, that would have been disastrous. So
I guess like the closest we've come to just like a conflict that's just like unresolved, but it feels right unresolved, was the episode about Connie and Pamela that we got like a little bit ago, where Connie was still like really upset at the end, but it like ended there. And like that was a good episode.
She wasn't fully so upset because she was like, I understand now. Hey, Renee, let's do this thing together to help me, like, you know, take some humility and like being like, yeah, I was wrong. The thing I was taking away the most at the end, though, was like, that was so good that it makes me retroactively frustrated even more that this was all precipitated by the one bizarro line at the end of Christmas Bells.
Christmas Bells is such an anomaly.
This is retroactively made it worse than it already was. Not like the episode overall, I mean, but like specifically just the way that they ended it so abruptly with that bizarre thing.
I think the
is
fact
even
that
worse
it's like,
now because of how good this was.
Like, not only were these episodes great, and that makes it worse, these episodes are extremely serious in tone.
Well, Christmas Bells was also very serious, but
is also serious, but it's such a mess of tone. Like, oh my gosh.
Christmas Bells was also serious, but in like an uncomfortable way.
The only good thing
in an
about
uncomfortable
Christmas
bad
Bells
way. Where the guy's like,
inclusion.
I'm reading my serious slam poetry about my dead wife now in very dramatic ways that I'm reading it.
The only good thing about Christmas Bells was Jillian's inclusion in it, and that's not even canon.
Yeah.
I kind of want to rate these episodes the same, so like let's go to the second one, I guess.
Yeah. Let's roll. Right, we'll stop the recording here still, but
okay.
Let's talk about part 2, which is Triple-Decker Sundae. Okay, now we're here with Triple-Decker Sundae, episode 925, written by Marshall Younger. I like how we keep referring to it as part 2 when these are not part 1, part 2 episodes, and it's entirely possible that the remaining 2 episodes in this album will be just as connected. I don't remember if there was something else in the album description.
So I was downloading the last 2 episodes of the album.
I already sent them to you.
Yeah, but it's just faster on my phone. Okay. I have like my phone glitches.
Oh, like through the OAC app, you mean?
Yeah, my phone doesn't like it when I download things on it anymore, music-wise. So I just try not to, which is kind of a pain. So I've just been like mainly using the OAC app on my phone because it doesn't glitch super bad anymore on me. They've definitely done a lot better job on it. It works a lot better now. It doesn't like fry my phone. And then sometimes I listen to the episodes off my laptop, but it's usually off the app on my phone. I do store all the episodes like in my Apple, like iTunes still though. So yeah, episode by the same person.
Yep.
So in this episode, we get to have... Sorry, I'm sending someone something very quickly.
Marshall is continuing his absolutely, like, hot streak lately of phenomenal writing that he's been on.
What other episodes has he written recently again?
Well, recently we've been talking a lot about how he's been writing all of the Perkins-related episodes and stuff.
He's my boy. I claimed him as my boy. /parasocial.
As if he hasn't been writing for this show since before we were even listening to it, but...
Yeah, but, like, it was only recently.
That we appreciated the niche that...
That we had that one day where we were like, let's just appreciate everyone, which was very nice. I liked that. Okay. So, in this episode, now that I've boosted my mic all the way up with my screaming and my clapping, so in this episode we have Olivia, and most of the time she is in conversations with the
Leonid.
Philosopher Leonid that she is researching.
Like the meteors.
Who, like, I like the name Leonid. I like that name. And I was just like, oh, now we have this jerk up in here.
Jerk. He's a delight.
He
I
is
thought it was going to
interesting.
be very annoying, like comedic. Usually, when you have something like this, and it's like, oh, we need like the most recent thing coming to mind is when we had the Journal of John Avery Whitaker, and it was like in his Valentine's Day entry or whatever, and he was
Oh
like
yeah,
talking to someone imaginary in his head, and it
like
was like,
Plato or
yeah,
someone.
and it was like a really weird sudden shift in tone, and I was like, usually when you have someone like that, like I'm an imaginary character that you're gonna back and forth with. It's usually like mostly goofy focused, and so I was like, this is this is
It
totally gonna
was
be terrible.
very serious.
This is gonna be terrible.
It was
But I really
interesting.
he was funny, but also it was really good. And I realized in the end, I was like,
Even though
I
he was like a made up philosopher, he does sound like a philosopher that could have
and
existed. I
I
think they did a good job with that.
understand why his role in this episode had to be filled by someone imaginary that Olivia was talking to, and not another actual person.
I
Um,
think that it's later gonna be like, oh, he's the devil or something like that. Like,
I
just,
don't
you know,
think.
no, you know what I mean? Like, negative temptation
Uh huh.
thoughts kind of thing. Like, oh, you shouldn't tell your parents about
Uh huh.
all this stuff. You should lie to these people. Um, I I really want fan art of just him having like big, like kind of teary eyes, just like peeping over the kitchen counter at Olivia while she just looks on like completely unamused. And he's like, "You don't have any sheep in this time period." That was, yeah, I liked that. I was like, you know, this is stupid, and I paused for a moment and I was like, you know what? No, it's not. Like, I like this. Um, so she's talking with him throughout the episode about like his stances on things, and he like questions things, which are honestly like this is the like this thought process throughout
And they
the
made him
episode makes
a
complete
good
sense.
character who's asking good questions,
Yeah,
which is good.
and like
The worst thing they could
everything
have done here is make him a
works.
straw man, and they didn't, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and
Which
like I
makes
said,
sense because
he
it's
sounds like a real philosopher that could have existed. I know of lots of philosophers that have like very similar stances
which is
on
why it's
things.
weird that
They
they made
basically
someone
like
up.
picked and well, I mean,
I guess maybe it's
I think
because
it works that they made someone
they
up
didn't want to
because
be
I feel like
tied
people
to
could get
like,
kind of pissy if they picked like a real person, and people could also be like, "Oh, you like didn't portray them accurately,"
yeah,
or
like it
like
ties them to
you
like, oh, we have to do this and this
like
with them, and this gives
yeah.
them the freedom to do whatever. I figure that's the reason that they did that. I just thought it was
So
funny at first
like
when I was like, this isn't a real
I
person. Like, why?
I think it's funny that we both like researched the heck out of trying to find out who this
Yeah.
guy was, only for him not to be real.
Once I realized
Um,
how much of a role he was going to play, I was like, I understand why they wanted to make their own OC for this instead of
yeah,
trying to take a real person and fit it into the mold they needed for the episode.
yeah. I think it would have been really awkward if they chose a real person. Um, So we also have Olivia. So we have Olivia, we have Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
Zoe's trying to figure out what's up with Olivia because Olivia is acting very off and different. Olivia was so somber in like both of these episodes after the skiing trip. Like I've never heard
I
like
don't know
that tone
why.
of voice from her. Honestly, I say this in a very loving way. Olivia needs therapy like
I mean,
after these
yeah, well,
episodes.
I like how you say
Like
that in a very loving way.
no, I
No,
don't want it to
I
come
meant
off
it
like
in a
as
mean
a
way.
I every single time I should specify every time I say a character from something needs therapy, I'm not trying to say that like in a joking way or
Well, yeah,
anything
I
because I
mean, I
know that's
think
like
you and I have both pretty clearly
yeah,
and long-windedly espoused the benefits and necessity of
yeah.
therapy on this
Like
podcast before.
I know that's like a common joke that people can make like
That's
if
fair.
there's like something wrong with you like oh you need therapy like no I think Olivia definitely needs to have some therapy. I'm not even saying like necessarily like with someone at her church, like not necessarily like church counseling, but
Just
like
grief
just
counseling.
general yeah,
Yeah.
counseling. Like even if she like talked to her school counselor or something like that. Like I'm sure lots of people are hitting up the school counselor after that trip.
Yeah.
Like
they would have been like every student
help.
who was on that trip, every student who was in the school probably would have been like asked, like, and given like resources and access to resources for that.
Which is only helpful if you actually use
because
them.
If you're all sometimes, I'm in denial, nobody can know.
Sometimes talking to someone can be a lot more helpful if you don't want to research or that feels like overwhelming to you. I'm trying to think. It's hard to separate like what happened in this episode from the last one because they're just so entwined.
Yeah.
Because this is basically just like a part 2. The last one kind of just stops. So
this one like I said, in my mind, it's like this one. This starts off. This is like the point where she starts talking to Leonid. So
yeah. In
terms of Olivia, it's all of her trying to be like, I shouldn't tell anyone about this because I know what they're gonna say, but I want to figure this out. I'm asking these questions to myself essentially, and I feel like when I was looking back on it, I had to keep reminding myself to think about it through the context that this is Olivia talking to herself, and that she knows she's talking to herself. She's not talking to another person, because that is distinctly different than if she was talking to a different person than herself who's asking her these questions.
She's kind of like, what's the word? No, that's not it. Catastrophizing. I think that's it.
Catastrophizing?
Yeah, I learned that word from the Dream SMP because I'd never heard it before. I didn't think it was a real word, and then it appeared in some of my readings for school. I feel like she's like catastrophizing things like a little bit in certain aspects, which totally makes sense because she's also going through a grieving process and like all these like anxieties and maybe a little bit of depression too. And she's 12, which I was very surprised by. I didn't realize she was that young.
I feel like Dave said she was a teenager before. I could be wrong.
Like I thought she was like 14
so did
or something like that. I sent you like an all caps message. Yeah. Like, Olivia's 12? What?
I didn't think so. It's entirely possible they said previously that she was a teenager. I thought that was the case.
I don't really know if they'd said her age.
So yeah, that's going on, and then Zoe is like, watching her and trying to figure out what's going on.
Talking to Wilson. Wilson's trying to figure out what's going on. Wilson comes up to Olivia and is just like, "Hey, you said 3 weeks ago that you would do your testimony at
and
like
this
Bible
was
study."
Him doing this on purpose. He was like, "This is my sneaky scheme."
Yeah. Which I don't know how I feel about.
I don't think that was the right move to make, personally.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I feel like you're struggling with your faith, so I'd like you to get up and talk about that in front of everyone, and I think that'll fix things for you. Instead of, having an open dialogue with you about it, maybe, like I also didn't do when I thought one of you was going to die on the ski hill.
Hey, I just got a lot of, like, Rydell Revelations wit feelings from...
being like, I'm going to take a more hands-off kind of, like, external manipulation kind of approach to fixing this problem.
He could have handled things a lot better.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he realizes how much Olivia is struggling.
Yeah, well, he makes that clear when he talks to Zoe. If he actually
talked to her, then he would, but that's apparently a novel concept, so we can't have that.
So, Olivia is forced to confide in Zoe and be like,
yeah.
Don't tell anyone.
I felt so bad for Zoe at the end when Zoe told Winston and Wilson. Sorry,
here's the thing.
Too much Ace Attorney. And then
too much Overwatch.
And then like Olivia started snapping at Zoe, and Zoe started crying, and I was just like, oh no, please.
And here's the thing. Zoe did not go and tell Wilson everything like Olivia wanted her not to do. I mean, admittedly, she was kind of going to do that, but she didn't because she went to do that, and then Wilson's like, yeah, I already figured everything out. And, I mean, I understand they're children, and she's really worried about Olivia, so when Olivia starts freaking out at her, her response is to be, like, defensive and worried and get emotional about it. I understand. I think from my perspective, being someone who's like older and after you've like gone through like the younger emotional moments, if I was in Zoe's shoes and
I would have told if I was Zoe, just straight up.
But also, if I was in Zoe's shoes and I hadn't told Wilson, he had been like, I already knew that stuff and we were talking about it. And Olivia came and she's like, you betrayed me. I can't believe you would do that. And instead of like Olivia running off before Zoe could say it, if I was Zoe, I would have been like, hey, stop, listen to me. I did not.
As a 12-year-old, you would have done this?
No, I'm saying like me as someone older who's like,
you like, can't. No, you're not 12. I'm just saying,
like, I appreciate, like, she's 12. I understand why she reacted that way, but once you have the more emotional maturity of having gone through stuff like that in her shoes, I would have been like, hey,
she's 12.
Olivia, hold on for a moment. Listen to me. Stop it.
Hold on for a moment. Take this cup of tea. Calm yourself. Let's be adults about this.
I just thought it was funny. I was like, this is how I would have handled it. And I was like, she's 12. It completely valid that's how she reacted. I completely agree that it's reasonable to have that reaction.
My favorite part in the episode was Wilson talking about this old prof he had at his university, which there have been a bunch of pastors I've heard talk before who have had stories like this where they're talking to like very like scientific people who are atheists and they get in like debates about them and then they just get like really into debating them. Like I've heard so many stories like that, and then it always ends with like, we're still in contact every now and then, but they never like really changed their opinion. But, like, I loved Wilson so much because he was just like, oh, yeah, he was a Christian the whole time. He was just screwing with me, and he wanted me to become more dedicated to my studies out of spite. And I was like, you know what? That is actually hilarious. I love your prof. That is amazing.
I really like that. And the thing is, not just like, oh, I want you to study more or I'm spiteful. It was like, I want you to understand this material, and the best way for you to engage with it is, like, if you are trying to beat me in an argument and you think that, you know, you're trying to help me, you're trying to beat me, whatever approach you're taking, if that is what I can get to motivate you, that is going to make you engage more, both with the material as a student and as a person of faith. This is what is going to make you actually question and try and actually understand what you believe more so than if we're just like having a palsy conversation about it.
And like for Wilson's character, like specifically, I love this choice so much for like two reasons.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Because like I didn't think about it until now. Like for one, he didn't become a Christian until he was like way older, which like that's a lot of information to retain once you get older. So like unless you come up with like a way to retain it, it's going to be very hard, like especially in seminary school, to like learn all the material because you didn't grow up with it. And he didn't become a Christian until he was like his late teens, I believe.
Or an adult, yeah.
Or we don't really know, but like, and Wilson, reason 2, Wilson of all characters, this little jerk is so argumentative. It is so perfect for his character. Like, I could also see this like being good for Whit, but like Whit's been a Christian his whole life. For Wilson, this like not only gets him learning everything very, very quickly, it lets him get out his petty little grudges and vast amounts of anger. It is so perfect for his character. It's such a good character choice. And also it keeps up the trend of us just like learning a lot more about him growing up within like the past several years, I guess. He's only existed for a couple years. But, like, between this and also, like, the prison story, it's neat to learn more about him.
In the in-between time, yeah.
Yeah. But, like, it's, that's such a good character choice for him. Like, anyone who's read the Young Wit books just knows, like, what a little argumentative jerk
it's a really good point, yeah.
It's so good.
I really liked that story, especially because of what it gave to Zoe in terms of, like, what should you be doing? What is your role in all of this to help support Olivia right now? And I think that was a really good way to help Zoe understand what she needs to be doing, which is just be there as a friend, be vigilant and ready to answer any questions that she has, but not try and be like, you know, coming to her and shoving everything down her throat. But with basically every situation in life, be a good friend, be there for someone, and be ready to talk with them what they need to talk about when they need to talk about it.
I'm so glad these episodes exist
Yes.
because I know we say it like pretty often now, but like it's harder and harder for
Mhm.
like an episode that feels original on the show to come out, which
Not
is
just an
completely
episode that it feels
understandable.
original, but a theme that feels
Yeah.
original and that feels like it's a big topic wholly unexplored up to this point.
Yeah, and we've never had any episodes
I
like
know they were going to
this.
do this with
So,
Mandy during the divorce arc, they said,
but they didn't.
but they did.
But they didn't.
But they
Which
didn't.
needs more credence to my "is Olivia going to vanish" theory.
I know. So that's where the episode leaves off, is with Olivia like storming away, betrayed, and then she decides to go get a triple-decker sundae, which is kind of her like emblematic, symbolic gesture of like, I'm a bad girl now because I'm looking at things. I'm looking at things that I've been told are wrong, and I also don't exactly understand what the meaning of gluttony actually is, and I'm trying to take an objective look at like, what are the things that I've been taught are sinful, and are they things that actually harm someone or not? Which is also, that's what I like, is that, like you said about Leonid, he's not being like, you should go do those bad things. You should go like, he's like, no, you should do these good things. You should tell the truth, and you should obey your parents and listen to your teachers and stuff like that.
I liked him so much because he felt like an actual philosopher.
Yeah, and he was like,
it wasn't all bad stuff.
Critically, he's not just saying like, do whatever you want. He's saying critically examine what you're being told to do. If you're being told something is bad, okay, why is it bad? Because some of the things you're told are bad. It's like, well, don't kill someone. I understand why I shouldn't do that. But it's like, is anyone, including yourself, going to be hurt if you eat this ice cream? No, which is true. That's not what gluttony is. But he's doing it, deconstructing it in exactly the same way that any Christian should be looking at their faith and being like, okay, what do I understand? How do I interpret Scripture? Am I interpreting it the right way? I feel like this is a thing that it says is wrong. Does it actually say that? And then we look at like, we have to look inwards to our spirit. How do we feel like about how God feels about this thing? Does it make sense that this is the correct interpretation of Scripture? And that's where we look to other people's interpretations. We talk to people we trust, and we ask God and like seek their guidance on like, oh, does it, is this something that is wrong? And we come back to that verse that I love, that Whit brings up in Choices in Sunday school, where he talks about like, all that does not come from faith is sin, about like the Holy Spirit's guidance when it comes to like giving you conviction on helping you figure out whether something is sinful or not.
Which they brought up in this episode, so we brought up.
Yeah, that you, not just saying like, oh, if you do something wrong, you should feel convicted about it, but understanding like, if you're like, but also like, there are things like you might not think like, oh, I don't think that this is something that the Bible says is wrong, but you're doing it and you can feel like, oh, I know this is wrong, even though it doesn't say it, because you're feeling convicted. Likewise, you're like, it sounds like it says that this is wrong, but it doesn't make sense. There's no reason that it would have any kind of thing related to that. And I mean, we can look at like Old Testament, New Testament stuff, like, look at the vision of Jesus coming to, is it Paul or Peter, one of them, who's like gonna eat the meal at the house, and he's like, I've given you all of this food is clean for you to eat, and basically saying like, I'm, for the purposes here, I'm releasing you from the food restrictions of the old covenant and stuff like that, because that doesn't, it's not a health concern anymore, which is the reason that we have these things. There's no reason anymore, like it's not spiritually bad for you to eat shellfish. So I don't think like you don't need to be under these like spiritual restrictions anymore, because some of the Mosaic Law was about hygiene, some of it was about spirituality.
I really
and
want
Jesus
that
being
to
like,
be
okay, like it's okay. We know how to cook pork warm enough that you're not going to get trichinosis from it anymore, so you can have bacon.
I really want that to be my new Tumblr description. Like, it's not morally bad for you, or spiritually bad for you to eat shellfish.
So I think that understanding of it, like looking at it and trying to figure out like, okay, well, why was God saying this thing in this context? Or am I even interpreting it right? And, seeking the Holy Spirit's guidance on these things is an important step in like understanding and I mean, seeking the Holy Spirit's guidance is always important when you're trying to understand what Scripture is saying, whether or not it's like in an instructive way or not. Either way, the point is, there's a lot of like guidance and self-reflection and research and all these things that go into that kind of thing. And so these are the kinds of questions you should be asking. That's the kinds of questions everyone should be asking and looking critically and stuff. And so I really like it. I love this. I love seeing someone have to dig down into their faith and like, what does it mean? What is it actually really rooted in? Because you can't have a strong faith if it's just built around like, well, other people told me to do this and they said this was true. So I was like, okay. Like you have to ask questions. You have to seek answers, find and understand what your own faith is. You are wrestling with God, like Jacob. It's great. And then Leonid is also like, I'm going to call out the Crusades and also megachurch televangelists and being like, thank you for your donations, people on TV. I'm going to buy my 19th yacht. And I was like, yes.
There's just a lot of stuff where like Leonid was just like, what about this? And what about this? This is clearly bad. So what about this? And I was just like, oh my gosh, like lots of the stuff that just like was Olivia's internal thought.
See, that is exactly the part.
Was just, it felt so realistic. Like I was just like, yeah, this is how my internal thought like works.
That is exactly the part where I thought,
well-written.
Okay, so here's the whole note I wrote about that. Even though I was kind of confused at first by the tone of like having Olivia converse with this occasionally goofy imaginary philosopher, I can see why they did it narratively because he was one of the biggest characters in the episode, and I don't think there was a way to eliminate or replace that role with another real person because Olivia needed to have
and also, if it was just Olivia, just like in dialogue with herself, and one voice was like more echoey, that would have sucked.
It would have been very cringe, yes. Olivia needed another person to talk to and bounce her thoughts off of and her questions off of and challenge her ideas, but she also needed to keep everything secret and hidden. So she needed
and
someone
also, just as an added writing thing, it does give the episode a bit more levity.
Yes.
Too. So
which is good, so it's not as much of a downer, yeah.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, especially when she was going back and forth and it was like, all these bad things have been done by Christians. She's like, that's not true. And it's like, what about the Crusades? And she was like, that was like 1,000 years ago. And it's like, well, the televangelists. And she was like, ugh. And I was like, that was the moment, just like you said, where I was like, it is interesting to remember that when we usually have a character talking with a figment of the imagination and they're like, but hey, you're just inside my head after all. Like to remember here, thinking back on those specific conversations, this is Olivia's internal dialogue. This is just all of her going back and forth in her mind and wrestling with herself, trying to justify and trying to counter-argue her own thoughts, where she was like, you know, basically trying to justify, like, yeah, it's okay, my beliefs that I'm used to are fine, and I was right. And then she's like, but what about this thing? And like, you know, like people think when you're arguing with yourself and trying to figure out something else and you're like debating back and forth and you're like, but what about, no, that's fine because this. You're like, oh wait, no, but there's that thing. I'm like, but that, and that it really does make sense, not like when you re-put it back into the context of it being in her own head, which I really like, because I feel like a lot of times when we have a character arguing with themselves internally, even in like a goofy Trent DeWitt kind of situation, it loses some of kind of the internal logic. Not necessarily all of it. It depends on the context.
There's also that thing I hate where like a character says something and they're just like, yeah, but you're not real. You're just in my brain. And there are like some good moments for like the you're just in my head can be used. Like that can be used in good scenes, but lots of the time it's not. And like I like that they just never use that phrase or anything like that in regards to Leonid in this episode.
Any acknowledgments that she had of that, like, I feel like reinforced the fact that it's like, yes, you're questioning and struggling these things because you are
like they don't
talking
need to say that Leonid's
things.
in her head. It's obvious that he is. That's just a given.
I mean, she brings it up a bunch of times in the episode, but
well, like, yeah, but they didn't make it obnoxious.
Which was what I was expecting at the beginning of the episode. I was like, oh, this is way too slapstick. They did it really well. And like you said, the moments of levity that it did give it felt like it was taking something either serious and like giving it levity instead of taking a normal scenario and making it all,
I don't
like,
know why,
goofy
but just
clown
the like,
nose.
you don't have any sheep just really got me. I was just like, oh,
You're
Leonid
not going to
misses-
let me eat ice cream.
He's like, oh, that's not how you do it. I don't know anything about modern technology, but I don't think that's right. I think you're bad, actually.
I like how, so we talked about, he was like, you know, it's good to trust your parents, but understand. And he brings up, like, I mean, a very common logical point, and it makes sense. Olivia's thinking this, and she's like, no, that's not true. About, like, if you do want to, if we're in the olden days and you do want to control a lot of people, giving them a superstition that is going to make them think, oh, this is the thing that I need to do, is a good way to get them to do what you want to do. And she was like, no, that's not true. That's not why any religions exist, because someone wanted to manipulate someone.
Olivia, like, found out what the word cult was today, apparently.
But he was like,
there's, like, a difference between, like, cult and religion, though, isn't there?
Yes, there's a very categorical difference, yes.
Yeah.
But he was like, look at these things, like gluttony. If you eat triple-decker Sundae, it's not going to be hurting your body, ultimately. It's not that unhealthy. It's not going to be hurting anyone else. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. So why have you been told not to do it? And she was like, I don't know. And so in the end, when she finally does go, and she has the symbolic, like, I'm going to go here and get
Bad
the triple-decker.
Girl Olivia was so funny to me in some parts, because it was almost like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3-ish, when he has, like, the symbiote in some ways, where, like, Zoe was just like, where have you been? Where did you go? And she was just like, I've been out here the whole time. And she's like, well, what did you say to Wilson? She's like, I told him I wasn't feeling well and ran to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, bad girl.
I went and had an anxiety attack in the bathroom.
Mew, 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 mew.
Pew, pew, pew. I love that she was like, I'm going to go get a triple-decker Sundae, but I'm going to get it from a random ice cream place that we've never heard of, because I guess
should have gotten it from Hal's Diner.
She was like, I feel like I would have been morally shamed by wit's end for getting a lot of ice cream, so I had to go to an evil ice cream shop to have my evil ice cream.
I'm gonna get an ice cream at a place that doesn't support charity. Ah!
I'm going to the capitalism store to do ice cream crimes. I'm getting some ice crime.
Please give me one ice cream with your best gold shavings, Jeff Bezos. Thank you. I'm bad now.
This is some chocolate ice crime. Because I'm bad now. But no, I really like it. And I really like that Wilson understands that. He did acknowledge that there's like, there's a spectrum of kind of like, how much are you questioning things to the point that, like, you could be, like, really spiraling out and having the existential crisis, whereas you could be, like, having a less kind of personally, internally traumatic kind of experience with, like, that kind of internal search.
I feel like,
and so
Olivia's, he was like on kind of, like, wavering between the two because of her grief, though.
Yeah, and I like that at first he was like, okay, like, that is a normal response and it makes sense, and it's a healthy and normal thing that everyone has to go through to, like, question and help deepen their own understanding of their faith. And even when he was like, okay, maybe this is a little more than I thought, maybe I need to do some intervening and help her, but it's still not like, stop questioning things, you need to listen to me and shake yourself out of it. And I'm really glad that that's not the response they're having. It's like, okay, let's answer your questions, let's help you understand this, and deal with what you're feeling, let's figure it out together. And I'm really glad
like these episodes are so good for another reason, that, like, a lot of kids who listen to Odyssey, and, like, people our age too, like, grew up on the show, and that means that they were probably Christians growing up. And I feel like there's a point in, like, every person who became, like, a Christian, like, when they were born, basically, growing up, where you're like, okay, so what's my deal, basically, and, like, what do I think? And then lots of the time, you just come out of that just, like, understanding why you think what you think, which is good, like, because you actually can process your thoughts better. You've gotten to an age where, like, you
need to have answers for your own
what
questions,
you believe in, and you're not just like, I think this because this is what I think, and this is what my parents told me.
Why do you think that? Because I do. And why is that?
Yeah.
Because they told me that. So
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and I was thinking before we started recording about how that viewpoint is so, like, not entirely, but a lot of it will correlate in a causational way, like intrinsically with the amount of privilege that you have. Like, because if you're someone who's really privileged, then you have less need to question why you believe what you believe, or
Yeah.
what do you believe. Because when it comes to what do I understand, or what does society think the Bible actually says about, let's say, when it mentions slavery, when it mentions being gay, when it mentions women's role in the church, stuff like that. If you're an able straight white man living in America, then it's like, why, I have the ability to question how I interpret things, but I could interpret things in a very like old-fashioned way. I could interpret them in a progressive way. It doesn't really affect me. I don't have to question it that deeply. But if you don't have that privilege, then you really have to dig down and ask yourself, like, okay, what is this actually saying? What does this mean for me? You have to really dig down. You have to ask God about it, and you have to depend on actually talking with God and talking with other people to understand it, instead of just being able to be like, I mean, whatever, it doesn't impact me. I remember when I was a youth leader, someone asked me once, like, why is it that, like, all of the kids we have here who are, like, super poor and come from, like, super rough backgrounds are, like, so many of them, like, have become Christians, and, they're, like, have all these, like, really dedicated and passionate faiths, and I hear about that in, like, other countries where things are really bad, but then, like, people who are, like, rich or better off that we see here at school and stuff like that, like, they're like, sure, I believe that, whatever. I was like, because when you have to go through harder things, it forces you to rely on it. And that's not to, go with the old adage of like, suffering's just making you stronger. So it's a good thing. Be glad that, bad things have happened to you because it made you stronger. But it is important to understand how the privileges that you have make it a lot easier for you to be blinded to the need of, like, needing to actually dig down and understand, like, oh, I don't need to take a stance on, like, are women allowed to speak in the church? I mean, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't really care. Doesn't impact me. Is like, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have the need to drive you to understand those things, it's entirely possible that you will still want to, out of being a decent person, hopefully. But you don't have an intrinsic need to be able to do that. And so that impacts a lot of the way that different demographics are affected by, like, the need to, like, actually dig down and understand what you believe and stuff like that. And that is what Olivia is experiencing right now. Is like, in my life, I haven't really gone through all these, like, rough stuff or dealt with these really tough things that have forced me to ask these questions until I had someone close to me, like, die in a sudden and traumatic and meaningless way. And
not even close to her, really.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, even someone that distant away, even at that distance, hasn't had to deal with that in a way before that just really made me question all of these things before. And now I have to deal with that because of, this suffering that I've experienced. Which is,
like, that phrase, like, no one ever said, like, faith is easy, basically, because it's constantly, like, just, like, understanding why you believe the things you do, and like, I don't know, your opinions being challenged. It's hard to go online and see a bunch of, like, people who call themselves Christians just be really awful to a bunch of people. And, like, that Twitter assignment I just had to do, there was, like, one day where we were all, like, reading the profiles, like, descriptions of all the people who tweeted them, and the majority of them were Christians, and I was like, oh, that's a big oof, because there's some real bad stuff in these. And honestly, lots of the time it feels like the greatest threat to Christians, or, like, I don't know if threat's the right word, but, like,
I understand what you mean.
Other Christians who are just, I don't know, misinterpreting a lot of stuff.
Misinterpreting implies that a lot of them have ever read any of the Bible.
I guess, like, willful ignorance is also a problem.
Well, like I always say, because people always say, like, why is it so common that we hear all these things of, like, abuse in, like, the church, especially when we look at, like, in the 20th century, like, all the stories coming out of, like, in the Catholic Church, like, all these things.
Like, a couple days ago was the
Day of Truth and Reconciliation,
holiday.
Yeah, it was 2 days ago. Yeah, residential schools, I mean, looking at history, like Emperor Constantine and the Crusades and stuff like that, and it's like,
Didn't they like eat people or something like that
maybe, I don't know,
in the Crusades?
probably.
I think you're the one who told me that was a thing.
Not that I know of.
Unless I learned about that in LFI. That might have been in LFI.
But like thinking about that kind of thing, and people are just like, why are there so many bad people like in these positions of power in religion? And I always say, I mean, it's not about the religion, it's just about the fact that people who are bad and corrupt are always going to seek positions of power. People who want to have power over other people are always going to seek positions that give them that power, whether it's political or it's religious or any kind of administrative thing like that. And the unfortunate thing is that because of Constantine, because the church became incorporated into a governmental kind of role where it was hierarchical and had power, that meant that the church had power, which was probably the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of humanity, in the history of Christianity, I mean. This is what I meant to say. What the worst thing was it becoming incorporated into the Roman government, which then meant like this is now a seat of power, which means people are going to want to be in it because it's power and not because they want to help people. And I feel like the way that that has kind of flowed on to impact the entire rest of the history of the church has
and also
flown
like
from
negative
that.
things like creating a whole branch of religion just because you want to get a divorce. Like just things where it's just like, why are you doing this? Like I get why he did it. But like why are you doing
a couple weeks,
that's a very extreme example
a
though.
couple weeks ago on Bleepface, Jeff was talking about how he was sick for like the one day of school where they learned Roman numerals in like grade 3 or whatever, and now
Does he just not know how to do Roman numerals?
And now he still doesn't understand them to this day, despite the time that he spent trying to understand them. And Gavin's like, Gavin or Andrew, one of them was like, I knew someone once who like was reading something out loud in like a history class or something, and they never heard Henry VIII read out loud, and they thought his name was Henryville.
I'm gonna call him that now.
Oof.
Oh my gosh.
Gavin was like, surely you could take 5 minutes and like learn Roman numerals. And Jeff was like, I used to have a laminated card I kept in my wallet to help me figure it out, and then I lost it. I've tried. I can't.
I get that you and I were a little bit ahead of the curve in understanding Roman numerals in terms of just like we had to know it for music.
Oh.
So like I
was like, why?
No, like we had to know it for music, so we learned Roman numerals when we were really, really little.
Did that predate our knowing it otherwise? I feel like
I
would have.
I don't know about you, but it definitely did for me.
I feel like by the point
there was never a day growing up in school where they were like, we're learning Roman numerals today.
I don't feel like that was
what
a
they
thing
were.
Either.
They just kind of expected us to know them, and I was fortunate because I knew them from music.
I feel like I learned them just from a clock that used Roman numerals earlier than I learned them from any point in music.
We had a clock at home that used Roman numerals.
Sorry?
One of our, like the clock in the living room.
Exactly. I feel like I would have learned it. I feel like it wasn't until later in music where you start seeing like a 4-chord or a 6-chord like represented. Like
See, I would cheat on my theory when Mom was like, "What number is this?" And I would just look at the clock and I'd be like, "That's 4."
Yeah. No, I feel like I learned it from a clock before I learned it from that. Anyways,
we got so off topic.
This is a really good pair of episodes. I'm giving them both 5 out of 5. I absolutely adore them. I can't, whichever way this ends up going for Olivia, I feel like most probably it's like she will come.
She's gonna.
Excuse me.
I think we both know which way it's gonna go.
I'm sure things will resolve okay for her in the end, and she'll be like, actually, it's good and it's fine, and I'm normal.
I just think it's so funny that us and Wilson and Jason were all like freaking out over Emily. She didn't even show up.
She wasn't
even
in the episode.
She was mentioned twice and never showed up. She was living her life, skiing down black diamonds. Good for her.
As I listen to the episodes, like the
last thing that girl needs is more stress.
I update my playlists about what characters are in each episode as I'm listening to them. Like okay, this character's in here, and I'm like adding the episode to these playlists. And so I was like, okay, yeah, Emily or Olivia and Zoe, and yeah, Emily's in here. She hasn't showed up yet, but they're talking about her and stuff like that. And I reached the end of the episode, and I was like, Oh, I have to go back and take her off of that because I preemptively I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna be in it before she actually
I
showed
don't
up.
blame you.
And then she didn't.
I thought she was gonna be in them too.
I don't normally presume like that, but I did in this case.
To
and
be
I was
fair,
incorrect.
we had every indication that she was gonna show up.
Yeah.
So it is completely justified.
I mean, like you said, we did zoom in when we talked about the album predictions. We were like, here is Olivia, here's Zoe, and here's a stretcher.
And here's Emily dying in the background.
Well, no, we were like, strictly speaking, here is there is a gurney, a spine board in the background, and there's a person on it, and we can't see who it is or how big it is. And I think we even pointed out the cloth is drawn over them, it's a body bag.
So you can't see who it is.
We're like, yeah, we can't actually confirm it's Emily. It actually looks like a dead body the way that they have the cloth over it.
Funny thing.
So we did point all of that out in advance.
We did, and we also said the fall was, like I said before, going to be not literal.
Fall from faith, yeah.
And if it was literal, it was going to be off a ski chair.
Yeah. I mean, really, he didn't fall, period. He just hit a tree. There was no falling involved.
Yes.
I mean, I guess he fell to the ground
fell.
after he hit the tree, but...
Bro...
I wasn't saying that in a dark humor way. I'm just saying
I thought you were...
He did not... There was no fall that caused his injury. Unless you consider skiing diagonal falling, I guess.
Miss Adelaide, when she was the wife of the guy who died is pregnant with twins, and one day she's gonna have to explain to her kids how her dad died. She said how a tree killed her dad, and I was just that wording. Which I guess she was trying to talk about how ridiculous it kind of was.
How meaningless, right? That was the thing she was trying to emphasize, and I really liked how she pointed out, this is why I believe what I believe, and this is why I need to believe what I believe, because the nihilism of that is the only comfort that I can take in understanding when bad things happen like this.
Which, I know people like that.
That's what a lot of people who are agnostic, follow that same train of logic.
I don't like the word agnostic, I'm not talking about the meaning. I just don't like how it sounds audibly. It just
consonantly, it's not the nicest word.
It sounds clunky.
Yeah.
I think it's the G.
The G and then the length of the O. It's I understand what you mean.
It's a bad sounding word.
It's a bad mouth feel.
It's a bad ear feel. It's a bad mouth feel. I think they should choose a different word.
Should rebrand agnosticism.
They should rebrand the word agnostic. I think agnostics, it's time for them to rebrand themselves using a different word. Is there actually a difference between agnostic and atheist?
Yeah, agnostic is more I looked it up. It's more
ambivalent
about what you believe. It's either I don't know what I believe or I don't really care. I don't have strong feelings either way, really. I'm just kind of ambivalent.
Yeah, an atheist is there's no God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the word agnostic is bad and it needs to be changed because I don't like that word. You know what? I can give some good words that would substitute, but they're already words.
Yeah, that's the problem.
It wouldn't work. We have to make a new word. We have to pull a Shakespeare and make a new word, elbow.
You're right. That's a common elbow belief is
And I was worried we wouldn't be lighthearted.
Yeah, I really love Miss Adelaide in these episodes. I feel like her character is only being written better and better as time goes on since, album 57.
She's our token non-Christian on the show at this point. Which
and
I
since
think is,
and post album 57,
funny,
they've written her really well since they stopped villainizing her.
They use it well because whenever they bring up that fact, it's always for a reason and a purpose, and it engages in conversations between the characters and also conversations listeners can have. So
yes, I'm very glad because after album 57, where they were this is what she believes, and that makes her a villain, and then. Since then, they're this is what she believes, and so she's just going to interact like a normal teacher should in normal situations, and I really like that. That it's not they're not making her, like I said, into a straw man where it's insane. Teachers won't let children pray in school. We must protest and rebel against it.
I will say,
like,
there are a couple teachers I have who I'm pretty sure, like, I've had in the past who I'm pretty sure are evil. But, like, Miss Adelaide is not one of them.
Miss Adelaide's not one of them. No, I loved that when that's what Buddy expected when he, like, brought his Bible to school, and he was like, that's what's gonna happen. She was like,
she's gonna eat my Bible for protein.
And she was like, no, I mean, it's a book. You can have whatever you want. Like, I don't care. Just don't disrupt class about it. Like, anything else. Like a normal person. So I appreciate that.
Wait, you're a normal person with normal feelings? And she's like, yes.
Wait, you mean, so, like, all of the campaigning and the media that I've heard from Fox News about the way that the children having a Bible at school or praying in school on their own time has been, like, fear-mongering this whole time?
I'm gonna be real with you guys. People don't always know when you're praying. They don't have telepathy.
What are they? You're not allowed to pray to yourself at school on your own time.
In your head.
Who's gonna stop you?
With your eyes open so no one can even tell you're praying.
Even if they know you do.
Thoughts.
What are they gonna do to stop you? Why would they care? If you're in class, pay attention. If you're not in class, do whatever you want.
The elbows are ganging up on us.
Anyways, these were great episodes. I'm giving 5 out of 5 to both of them. I really love them, and I'm really excited to see where this goes from here. I really hope it gives a strong finish, because it's
one other episode, at least I'm pretty sure, is going to have Olivia this album.
I feel like in the album description there was something else that they said was going to happen.
In the album descriptions when I was downloading the episodes, because they're... My only complaint about the OAC right now is when I click an episode to play it or download it, it shows me the description.
You have to blur your eyes.
So I have to be like...
You have to blur your eyes.
No, I'm trying to be very careful. But, like, I think I did see Olivia's name in the description of the last episode.
Which makes sense.
I could have been wrong, but it would make total sense if she was in the next one. I won't be surprised if they want to take, like, a little mini break for the next episode, which honestly, I kind of want them to do.
A literal gasp of air.
Yeah, not only just because, like, I don't know, just, like, an emotional break from, like, how heavy the last 2 episodes were. It also allows more time to pass, like, for Olivia.
Yes.
So that, like, any differences in how she acts or anything like that in the last episode will feel a lot more earned.
Yeah, I think a small time skip is a good idea.
A day after. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, next time...
That's the writer and me dual-purposing.
Yeah. Oh, what are your ratings? Sorry, were you giving the same?
Oh, I already said I agree with you.
Okay.
5. I feel like there's nothing I can really add at this point that we haven't already said.
Yeah. So, obviously, next time...
right, yep.
We're finishing the album, of course.
Set A Watchman, worth it, and then there's a bonus track.
About the album, and then reviewing all of Slippery Slope, album 71. I'm looking forward to see how this all wraps up.
Me too. I'm hoping I'm hoping Emily, Maury, and Suzu are, like, and... Oh my gosh, I forgot his name.
Cooper.
Cooper, thank you. Are, like, the characters in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, part of me is like, and I don't usually say this, part of me is like, maybe we should do a slice of life episode.
I'm glad we finally got to record this, since I listened to it so quickly after we did the last one, and I was in your usual shoes, where I was like,
soon
have you listened to the new episodes
opened,
yet?
Like, the music started, and I was just like, this music sounds a little different, and Chris was like, hi, and I was like, oh, Devin must have been dying, and, like, Chris, that was, like, literally, like, her first, like, I could feel the presence of Chris Anthony about to open her mouth and warn me about something, just, like, I could feel it in
You heard
the
Chris
air.
turn her chair around backwards.
Yeah, and put her hand on the back of the chair, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, internally I was like, the agony Devin must have been in for the past month. I am sorry.
I think it was only like 2.5 weeks, something like that, but
still,
it hasn't been that long.
still, and only throughout the episode did I get more like, oh, I would have been dying if I was Devin.
It's hard, right? Because it's like, I want you to do it, but I don't want to give enough away to, like, to be like, oh, this is, like, a really important and big episode. And just be the more, like, I'm cool and chill, casual, normal, and I just want to record in general.
Mm-hmm. Like, she'll never know what kind of crisis is entering my mind.
Yeah.
My machination.
So that's what we're doing next time.
I will say, I was a little, like, not frantic, but, like, a little, oh, no, between episodes, because the first one ended on, like, so abruptly.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, Devin listened to both of them. So the second one must be, like, not related. That sucks. And then Chris was like, hi. And I was like, oh, Chris is back.
And this one is also parental warning, completely unrelated. This one's actually about gun safety.
Okay.
No, yeah, I appreciate that you had so much faith in my ability to remember that I was going to stop if the episodes
We have been
were not
doing
related.
this for so many years now, and the times I have accidentally, like, listened to 2 episodes in succession for a multi-parter, you've rained down, like, righteous anger on me. And so for you to do it, and for me, like, to be the one reminding you, is quite the turntable.
Well, to be fair, normally it's like, we know this is going to be a multi-parter, only listen to the first one. In this case, it was like, we will listen to 2 of them, unless they're related, and they'd be like, oh wait, no, stop. And so we're going into it with the plan to listen to both of them, and the exception was to stop, and so that's why my brain was like, okay.
You know, and the last time that happened was when when Maury first showed up, actually. And then you were just like, speak nothing of Maury, which granted, like, those were 2 very separate episodes.
And you had no way of knowing that.
And this is, like, very multi-parter. I had no way of knowing that, but at the time you were just like, you dare listen
to both episodes. Here's the thing, Victoria. As time goes on, we've become more and more like, okay, we just need to listen to as many episodes as we can to get the recording.
That's very true.
Back then, it was about, like, even if we don't think they were related, we still want to listen to them separately so we can get our thoughts in case there's a connection. And now it's like, as long as we don't think there's going to be one, let's try and just, it makes recording easier.
Let's just hope for the best. Hi. Oh, no, they're related.
Whereas me, I was like, oh, yay, they are continuing on the same thing. I'm glad. Just zero memory of what I said before.
No thoughts, head empty.
No thoughts, head empty. I was playing Hades at the same time, so...
That time won't stop me, because I can't read.
Exactly.
Chris putting up a parental warning when
Actually,
I'm 7 years old.
I think I was finishing the DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Whatever I was doing at the time, there was a lot going on.
I was...
Mostly me thinking about the episode I just finished listening to.
I was just basically straight up listening to them and just, like, mindlessly scrolling through Tumblr. And, as is not always the case, but this time I was definitely paying more attention to the episodes than I was to anything I was looking at on my computer screen. I was just like, where are we going with it?
When I was doing, like, lots of times I won't have as much to say about episodes if I'm playing a game while I'm doing it, because I'm looking for, like, more overarching thoughts about it, and I'm trying to, like, keep my focus, like, split and stuff. I'm trying to focus on the episode, but I'm also doing another thing at the same time. This one was, like, constantly pausing the episode because I'm like, I cannot divide my attention for any moment unless I'm just, like, walking to another place. If I'm doing anything of substance, I need to not do that at the same time because I need to focus on what I'm listening to.
And then you have, like, that VeggieTales Zoom episode where I was playing BBS and listening to it, and I was like, I can feel myself willingly forgetting every single thing throughout this episode.
I'm literally reformatting my short-term memory as
and
we speak.
I wasn't even doing anything plot relevant. I was just running around, and I was, like, lost, basically. And
where
just, like,
were you
grinding.
Lost now that I've played BBS? Where were you lost?
I was in the...
Oh, we were Sleeping
Enchanted
Beauties, probably.
Dominion.
Yeah.
I
thought about it later,
and
I was like, that's definitely where you were lost, in the
running around
in the room.
But then when I got, like, super, super lost, was the Valerie PTSD episode,
Mhm.
and I was lost in Ben's maze and Maleficent's castle, and I was just like, this episode's so good, but I can feel myself, like, fuming internally because I'm lost in this video game.
Well, yeah, I
because
mean,
that is
the
a
longest
maze.
I
hate
spent-
that area.
The chests were it wasn't all that bad, but the longest I spent was like, where's this last puzzle piece?
When
And-
I was playing
and
it
then
with Annie, I got so turned around, like, so badly. I tried to look up all these walkthroughs, and I could just not figure out where I was, and it took me a very long time to get
We should
lost.
end this episode now.
Yeah,
So,
we should.
Thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
And yeah.
Yeah.
See you next time,
Bye.
whatever that may be.
Yeah. You've been watching The Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.
Oddcast.